are people going to say now that Donald Trump has been elected in the face of the horrible monster, the sea hag? Hello and welcome to the Lepanto Institute podcast, Bold and Stupid Men. I'm your host, Michael Hichborn. Here in studio, I've got my longtime friend and colleague, Shaun Kenney. Shaun and I have known each other, for what, 14 years
it's been
now?
14 years.
Yeah.
Isn't that nuts?
Yeah, folks, we met 14 years ago back in the dark ages of the internet on message boards doing apologetics work for the Catholic Church.
That's exactly it. Yep.
Yeah, we were...
And successfully. It was like
absolutely.
30 on 2, and it worked.
It was great. It was like Paul and...
Yeah, we had them surrounded.
Yes. Yes.
It was great.
But those were great times, guys. It was a lot of fun. We were, what did we talk about? We hit on all kinds of stuff. We would talk about Catholic morality. We would talk about politics. We would talk about just about anything you could think of. Even the existence of God, I think we got into.
Oh yeah, like the atheists kind of come on board, or what you would typically find on like Reddit, right? I mean,
yeah. Right.
I mean, I guess that's the modern version of it.
So the message board, it was basically the Facebook before it was Facebook.
Facebook before Facebook, yeah, the dark ages. So.
Yep. So this week, we had an election.
We did have an election.
And Donald Trump came out with the surprise win.
Yes, he did.
So a lot of people are saying that it's a surprise win. Now, I actually thought that he was going to win it. And I have to say that it was a gut feeling. It wasn't really based on anything other than the fact that we had hit 8 years of Obama fatigue. I was just kind of looking at just how angry people were about the way things were going and just how completely and totally vile Hillary Clinton was. So in thinking about the contrast of the two, it seemed to me that Trump would probably get it just because even the liberals couldn't stomach Hillary Clinton. But what do you think was the biggest factor?
Well, I mean, certainly that was there, right? I mean, you had, Trump came in with 500,000 fewer votes than John McCain had in 2008. And so, yeah, there was a bit of an impact there. Trump's GOTV simply wasn't what it ought to be. But Hillary Clinton missed the mark by 7 million votes from Barack Obama's high water mark. And so you compare those two numbers. I mean, maybe you had Bernie Sanders folks who just decided they were going to, sit in the couch rather than be with her or whatever the case may be. But yeah, literally, I mean, the Democrats fell down. I mean, Trump didn't necessarily win so much as Hillary Clinton lost. I mean, the Democrats effectively ran John Kerry in a pantsuit. And
right.
that unfortunately gives you a predictable result. And you look at things like the whole like the breaking of the big blue wall. I mean, I think there were some folks, there were a few prognosticators who are pointing at Pennsylvania, Michigan, saying it's going to be closer there than people think. I can't tell you that anybody thought Wisconsin was going to come in the way it did, and in the numbers that they did. But what's amazing, and we had mentioned this prior too, just talking, is that Hillary actually won the popular vote. It's very much the same as Al Gore when he won the popular vote against George Bush, but with the same sort of Obama fatigue that you had to play here. Back then you had Clinton fatigue, right? And you got, again, you had George Bush kind of come in, even though the popular vote was one the other way. This is precisely the same thing that happened here, is sort of this embedded advantage that Republicans tend to have with the Electoral College, just sort of shown through. And you start pulling down states like Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. I mean, Trump did well where he had to do well, and Clinton just couldn't match that effort.
Now, I have to say that one of the things that kind of concerns me right now, and I prayed and fasted. I know a lot of people prayed and fasted for Hillary to be defeated. And I think that, in thinking about this from a cosmic level, this isn't so much a matter of God giving us Donald Trump as he is giving us a reprieve from somebody as horrible as Hillary Clinton. And going back to the whole question of, the George Bush election in 2000, when thinking about how he won against the Clinton fatigue, the 8 years of Clinton fatigue, what happened right after that was that all of a sudden everybody decided to sit on their laurels because they were exhausted. They spent a year fighting Al Gore and basically a frog on a log. And, so after beating Al Gore, well, they got tired and they said, wait, our guy won. He's in.
Well, yeah,
So,
they did what every conservative does, right? So they turn around and say, well, we got the politicians elected. Now they need to do their job, and I can go back and live my life.
right.
Whereas the Democrats, on the other hand, and liberals or the political left in general, I mean, this is the entire ballgame for them. They never go away because they're at. I mean, the government and social action are intertwined for them, whereas with political conservatives in America, it's not. And so we kind of so it was a twofold problem. One, the conservative base stepped away. But the second thing is that when you get to like the Catholic intelligentsia, so to speak, both sides kind of sold out, right? I mean, for the conservative Catholics, quote unquote, they really sort of treated themselves as the Republican Party at prayer, right? For the liberal Catholics, on the other hand, they sort of went into the institutions. They took advantage of the faith-based initiative, and they started filing for grants, and they started wedding themselves to the government and sort of kind of approaching, welding their political faith with their sacred faith.
Well, we've certainly seen that with Catholic Relief Services and Catholic Charities. And,
CCHD, for instance, and
yep.
a number of different institutions. So what you're seeing now is kind of an outcropping of both, where you've got Catholics of either political bent sort of. I don't want to use the word selling out because it's too strong, but really not making the consideration of what welding your political faith to your Catholic faith really entails and what that does. And that's dangerous. I mean, somewhere between this or somewhere above this is an authentic Catholicism that needs to be represented. And for all the enthusiasm, for all the hyperbole that you see online, you've got to be very careful not to sell out to that, right? Because at the end of the day, these are politicians. They will let you down eventually. It's the great Father Richard John Newhouse line, is that the Republicans are going to betray us anyway.
Place not your trust in princes.
In princes, exactly. But that's the real danger is sort of selling out to the enthusiasm and not really keeping your eye on this. I mean, this is going to require a constant engagement. It's not going to be just as easy as sort of sitting back and watching it happen on its own accord. It never works that way.
No, it doesn't. And so when we look at the situation as it stands, so Donald Trump is the president-elect. Come January 20th, barring any kind of strange extenuating circumstance, he will assume the presidency.
And who would have thought that 2 years ago? That's just absolutely insane.
It's crazy. Yeah. I know. But, so he will be the president of the United States, and as such, he has made certain promises. One of the promises that he made was that he would defund Planned Parenthood. Yep. And I think that has got to be the number one priority for the pro-life movement and for Catholics around the country, to make sure they hold his feet to the fire on that, because Planned Parenthood is the political mechanism that keeps pro-aborts in office. Mm-hmm. You've got Nancy Pelosi in office. You've got Joe Biden, who's been a regular in office. You've got a whole host of Catholic pro-aborts that have been in office, Tim Kaine, because Planned Parenthood continues to fund their campaigns, with the money that we pay them through our taxes.
Sure, yeah. We're literally throwing money from the federal government to kill off future taxpayers. And this seems perfectly acceptable. I think you're absolutely right. Defunding Planned Parenthood is probably the most important thing that I think Catholics can expect or should expect from this new leadership over the first 100 days. And I think we should be absolutely vigilant and as loud as we possibly can be.
Absolutely.
There's so many things that go into this. I mean, you've literally got an entire half of the American political electorate. I mean, that party is literally held in thrall to the abortion industry. That's a problem, and that's a problem for Catholics. It's a problem for religious freedom. We're already seeing that effect with the Obama administration and some of the outcroppings there. That's dangerous. That's especially dangerous, and for an organization that is such an explicit enemy of the church. Yep. Right? To have that sort of power over how we make decisions in the United States, it threatens the idea of political citizenship. It threatens everything that we just discussed. It threatens the religious freedom of the Catholic Church. It threatens the free operations of the bishops. All of these things are sort of consummated in this one organization. So, there's obviously a number of other things to focus on as well as Catholics. Defunding Planned Parenthood is one. Obviously rolling back some of the offenses to religious freedom, rolling back Obamacare with the Health and Human Services mandate,
right.
Which we still have not accomplished, and I think a lot of folks really don't realize that the Catholic Church lost that battle. There are so many other things that focus on, but of all of these things, if you had to give me, I mean, appointing pro-life justices, getting a proper pro-life replacement for Antonin Scalia. All of these things are very important, but obviously, defunding Planned Parenthood has to be at the very top of the list, if not close.
Defunding Planned Parenthood. And then the second thing I think that we really need to focus on is personhood legislation. I mean, when you and I were at American Life League back in 2009, 2010, we went to Colorado. We went to, what was it, Montana?
It was Colorado and Montana, and we had North Dakota.
Right.
Had Mississippi as well. When everybody said it couldn't be done,
right? Yeah,
so we almost pulled it off.
We were on the ground. We were the one putting boots on the ground and making sure that this was being talked about in the press. I remember I was still kind of green when you were sitting there telling me, write a press release, Mr.
Hichborn, get it done.
And I was like, well, wait a minute, what's a press release? So, but yeah, the personhood legislation. What we have to realize is that by having a Republican president, a Republican House, and a Republican Senate, there is absolutely no reason why personhood shouldn't work at this point in time. All of the arguments that you and I heard when we were going out and trying to get endorsements from the bishops, we went to bishops' conferences. They wouldn't return our calls. They told us flat out, we will not endorse this. Why? Because they were told by James Bopp that now is not the time.
Sure, and that's going to be the catch with a lot of pro-life legislation. I mean, personhood might face different legal challenges as legislation, obviously, because Roe v. Wade is still the law of the land, right?
Sure.
So you've got to, and then if not Roe v. Wade, then Planned Parenthood versus Casey. So there are significant legal challenges to that in terms of legislation. On the other hand, you've got another other really good, solid pro-life legislation that's out there. That for one reason or another, that you've got bureaucrats that sort of interpose themselves between the bishops and doing the right thing.
Right.
And that's the real danger, is because they it's through no fault of their own. I don't necessarily blame most of them anyway.
Right.
But when you invest, months and then years of your life backing certain pieces of incremental legislation, when you're trying to do it brick by brick, and then all of a sudden the opportunity arises to actually execute, you're very hesitant to put all your chips in the center of the table and execute. I mean, and the reason why is because, sometimes, bureaucrats just lose their killer instinct, whereas, the base, the laity, we maintain that. We know when it's time to jump. We know when it's time to go. We're ready for this. Why don't we get it done?
It's so counterintuitive. I mean, that's almost like saying that you've got a football team that's going to sit there and train all season long. They're going to slog through the long season.
Don't put him on the field, Mike. He might break his leg.
I know, right? Yes, exactly. That's it. We're at the Super Bowl, but we're not going to go out there and put our all into it because we might get hurt.
Right, and 20 years later, it's like, don't put him on the field. He's too old.
Right. Yes.
So but that's exactly what happens, and so sometimes it's a matter of new blood, but a lot of the time too, it's when you do have this interposition of bureaucrats between bishops and effectively doing the right thing. I mean, there's so many things that we could get done. Defunding Planned Parenthood is like first and foremost. Getting rid of the HHS mandates, it's right there as well. The fetal pain capable act. I mean, that's another one as well, and that's incremental legislation, somewhat controversial. Obviously, any legislation that ends in "and then you can kill the baby" is probably bad legislation.
Well, my understanding of the pain capable legislation is that it doesn't actually end that way, because what it says is that if the child in the womb can feel pain, you may not execute an abortion.
Sure.
So you're not saying that, well, in this case it's okay. You're just saying in these cases it is not okay. So it's not actually permissive law. It is restrictive law in the strictest sense.
Okay, but I mean, that's comforting to hear, because I know that there are certain individuals on the the absolutist side
And
that would make the
I am one of them
argument.
generally. I'm just
Right.
trying to explain.
Sure, and I'm truthfully, I'm one of them as well, but I could see where that objection would be. Nevertheless, I
Right.
think it's good legislation, and I think that it's something that we should absolutely pass. But again, you're going to have individuals that come back and say, "Oh, you don't want to do that. It might not survive, legal challenge. It might not do this. It might do that." But bear in mind, I mean, you've got Justice Scalia's replacement. Ruth Bader Ginsburg is not going to live forever. And that's not wishing her ill or anything like that. I hope she lives for another 20 years in retirement off the Supreme Court bench. You got Justice Kennedy as well. I mean, you've literally got an opportunity to reshape the Supreme Court for a generation.
Yep.
There's absolutely no reason in the world why good, solid, pro-life legislation would not survive a judicial scrutiny where 6 of those members are pro-life, if not 7.
Exactly.
Right? And that's not a political division either. I mean, ideally, both parties ought to be completely pro-life because this is not a political position at all. This is a value that ought to be shared by the commonality of humanity. And
once again, this is why defunding Planned Parenthood is going to be preeminent, because then their legal defense is going to fall apart because they won't have the war coffers ready to go because we're not funding it.
Yeah, we're literally, as a generation, we're literally handing them the tools of our own destruction. And we've endured this for over 40 years now at the cost of 60 million lives. How many more are we going to forfeit so that we can employ a handful of abortionists and their lobbyists?
Right.
I mean, this is our moment. There's no better time to strike than now. And if we don't put every hand to the oar and pull now, we may not get this opportunity for a generation. That's the danger. We've got 100 days after President Trump. I can't believe these words even passing my lips. But you've got 100 days until the president and the honeymoon and Speaker Ryan and Mitch McConnell, they've got one opportunity to do this. Now's the time. Do not waste this moment. And the only way it's not going to be wasted is if you make your voice loud and clear, not as a partisan, but as a Catholic. And
absolutely.
That's critical. And that involves not just calling somebody, but using the best weapon at our disposal.
The rosary.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that the only way this happens is through the Blessed Mother. I'm firmly convinced of that. Her intercession will bring this home. If Mr. Hichborn, we're dealing with 100 years, and if Mr. Hichborn, we're actually looking at an anniversary of Fatima, if the victory is to be had to save human lives, if it's actually to end the tragedy of abortion, maybe this is the moment in 2017 where this happens.
Well, and I think that maybe what this whole thing was all about, this election wasn't so much God saying, here's a Donald Trump, but, I'm preserving you from the horrible monster that we would have gotten.
If you can find just 10 good men.
Yes. We found at least 10.
I will spare the city.
Yes. But on the other hand, we have to be careful not to become complacent. When you think of the scripture quote that's been going through my head all day is 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. And what it says, and I'm just going to read it to you real quick. It says, "Concerning times and seasons, brothers, you have no need for anything to be written to you. For you yourselves know very well that the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night. When people are saying peace and security, then sudden disaster comes upon them like labor pains upon a pregnant woman, and they will not escape." This is very interesting language. First of all, he starts off by saying when people are saying peace and security. Now, what are people going to say now that Donald Trump has been elected in the face of the horrible monster, the sea hag, Hillary Clinton? Okay.
A sea hag?
Yes.
Okay.
So that horrible that fiend, Hillary Clinton, he won. So conservatives and Catholics and everybody around the country is heaving a giant sigh of relief. And with that sigh of relief, are they saying peace and security? I think that they may be tempted to do that.
It's the same thing that happened with the Bush presidency, right? It was like, we elected the politicians, they'll do their job, and they walk away. Meanwhile, the opposition is assiduously working to undermine all of this.
Exactly.
So it's these are the 7 years of plenty, right?
Yep. Well, Thessalonians continues. It says, For you all are children of the light and children of the day. We are not the children of darkness. Therefore, let us not sleep as the rest do, but let us stay alert and sober. We have to stay alert. We have to be vigilant, and we have to be watchful. What does it mean to be alert? It means to be watchful. What did God tell Peter and his close apostles when they were with him in the garden? Sit here and watch. We have to be watchmen. We are to observe and to guard. And, we also need to pray and fast for our bishops because we need them to be our guardians and shepherds.
Yep.
Unfortunately, many bishops have been very silent especially on matters regarding abortion and homosexuality and socialism and some of the other social ills that we've been facing and seeing within our own church, like at Catholic Relief Services and the Catholic Campaign for Human Development, they don't speak out. What do they talk about? They talk about political things, things that have to do with money, things that have to do with the world around us. But this isn't our home. We don't belong here.
Mm-hmm.
We are supposed to be living here in exile, begging God for his forgiveness and his mercy, both for ourselves and for those around us. And in that, we will eventually, hopefully, find our salvation so that we can spend an eternity with him in heaven, and all of this world will go away.
Yep. I mean, and that too. I mean, think about the life of a poor bishop, though. I mean, 90% of your time is actually spent fundraising. The administrative tasks of being a bishop, it's not fun. I mean, it is a burden, right?
A foible of the 20th century, I would actually add.
And you, I mean, in many cases, surrounded by bureaucrats that sometimes don't have your best interest at heart.
Sometimes. I think a lot of the time, really.
Well, I mean, I'm going to give it sometimes, right? I mean, I'll be a little more charitable than that. But, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, these bishops desperately need our prayers. The only way that they're going to be fortified is through grace. And, I mean, they're trying to figure out exactly through whatever prudential judgment they're being advised with, is how to navigate these stormy seas. I mean, think about it. I mean, most of us thought that, a week ago, this nation was 7 points in Hillary's favor.
Right.
That didn't turn out to be the case. They're being advised that it's a certain way. You're starting to see that that's not really the case. There's this opening here for a lot of people to get out of their shell and do the right thing.
Right.
And this is where, rather than focusing on, whatever you'd like to focus on, whether it's, prudential judgment or, or whatever, whatever the case may be, it's the old hammer of fidelity.
Right.
We don't need administrators. We need bishops. We don't need, we don't need fundraisers. We don't need fundraisers. We need shepherds.
Exactly.
That's the difference.
Yes.
And but they can only do that through an operation of grace. I mean, there's no other means of doing it. Which again, that's what the rosary's for. That's why we were given that broadsword. And if we refuse to apply it, shame on us, because we're not giving the bishops the
grace,
the economy of grace that's owed to them. Yes,
yeah.
And our priests and our religious as well. So we've got a lot of work to do in that regard. But I think you're right. I mean, this is an opening. The question is whether or not we settle back into the political religions, or whether or not we take an advantage of this in from a perspective of the deposit of truth and faith.
Absolutely. I think that ultimately what it boils down to is just an acknowledgement that we have to live our lives according to the faith that Christ taught us, so that we can save or help to save those around us, and especially help to pray for and earn the graces necessary for the bishops, so that they can have the strength and fortitude to guide us as they are called to, so that we can all, like they say, when the tide rises, all boats are lifted.
Mm-hmm.
If we were all praying and fasting for the sake of the church and for the sake of the bishops and for the sake of the faithful, we really wouldn't be in the mire that we're in now. So we really need to start focusing on prayer and fasting specifically for the bishops, and to remain vigilant with regard to what's going on around us. We have a Republican House, a Republican Senate, and a Republican presidency. Don't waste it.
That's meaningless at the end of the day.
That's meaningless if we don't do something with it, and we have to make sure that we pray and we fast and we remain vocal about making sure that these promises that were made are
If your
adhered
faith
to.
is supposed to be like young children, right? And the best thing you can do is call your congressman and say, "Have you defunded Planned Parenthood yet? Have you defunded Planned Parenthood yet?
There
Have you
you
defunded?"
go. Are we
Keep
there
tugging
yet?
on their shirt. Yeah, are you there yet? Are you there yet?
All right, folks. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Once again, if you want to take a look at some of the other things that we're working on at the Lepanto Institute, you can go to our website at www.lepantoinstitute.org. We are always looking forward to your feedback, so you can email me at mdhichborn, that's Hichborn, at lepantoinstitute.org. Shoot me your comments and give me a question. If you'd like something covered in our podcast, we'll be more than happy to tackle it. In the meantime, we rely entirely on your donations. So if you click in the little upper right-hand button, there's a donate button right there on our homepage. We could always use the funds.
Yep. If you like what you heard,
If you like
put something in the tip jar.
That's all we ask. Thank you so much, folks. Take care, and God bless you.